Mike, welcome to Delray.
Yeah, thank you, man. First
Sorry
trip,
the weather isn't more cooperative.
right? First trip as part of officially a part of the TMG team.
Awesome, welcome.
Thank you.
So I wanted to talk to you about some things that I know you've been seeing and us as a firm have been seeing as well too with, OUS companies that are coming to the US. So these could be incubators from, tech incubators from Israel. It could be contract manufacturing organizations from, Ireland is a big contract manufacturing hub. And they're coming to the US and there's a couple different variables at play. So, let's just focus on the commercial side. So they need to hire that first in on the commercial team to really build out the entire infrastructure of what their commercialization process should look like. And we're seeing this happen further and further and further away from a regulatory approval, which makes it interesting as to what that person's really going to be doing over the next year or so, let's just say. So that would be one topic. The other topic is when you do get that person engaged, educating those OUS clients of ours on what benefits they need to put together, medical, dental, vision, et cetera, to attract talent here in the US, because it's very different OUS versus US as it pertains to the whole medical, dental, vision side of the house as a compensation package. Sure. And then the last thing would be, even when in such an environment as we are in today, when that person signs on the dotted line and you think you have your hire, you still have that at a minimum 2-week window, depending on the time of the year, like now, Q4 hiring, people's bonuses are being paid out in January, February, March, so you might have 3 months. How can clients and future organizations stay engaged with those new hires so they limit the risk of a potential counteroffer?
Yeah, I mean, a lot to unpack, but it's interesting because, like you said, it could be coming from Ireland, could be coming from Israel, could be coming, we're seeing a lot of companies coming in from Australia. You're working with a couple companies, as am I. And you're right, these commercial hires are tending to commercial leads, I would say, are getting hired a lot earlier on in the process than maybe a US company might look to hire their commercial head. And it's interesting because that role, while it might be termed a commercial lead, it's really oftentimes a general manager role or a president of the Americas role, right? And so the profile tends to be quite a bit different. They're not just looking for that individual that's got sales in their resume or sales leadership in their resume, or who's had a nationally scoped position in sales. It's everything. It's market access. They've got to put together a market access team. They've got to put together reimbursement. They've got to put together commercial operations. Oftentimes, this individual is in charge of marketing, so at least for a period of time, if not going to have oversight over those individuals upstream, downstream, et cetera. So it's interesting because the profile is oftentimes much different. And if you've got people coming from just a pure sales background and they aspire to that type of a role, my recommendation would be to do as good of a job as you can in rounding out that resume. Get that experience in commercial ops, get that experience in corporate national accounts, get that experience in market access or reimbursement. And certainly you're not going to be able to get all that, but as many touch points as you can have, I think the better off or more well-positioned that candidate will be. The second point is a great one. Yeah, I mean, it's always challenging when you've got companies coming to the U.S. I know you've had some success of your backgrounds with a PEO, and you've had some success connecting some of these companies in with a PEO, but it goes much beyond that. The scope of the way we do business here in the U.S. can be drastically different than the way business is done in Australia, the way business is done in Ireland, the way business is done in Israel. Everything from compensation levels to compensation structure, guarantees. You and I were talking the other day, just the magnitude of cost surrounding healthcare, right? Because so many of these places have socialized healthcare where they're coming from. So it's an interesting dynamic, and I think our firm is really uniquely positioned to help those companies.
Yeah.
Right. It's we've got two offices in the UK, one in APAC, one in Canada. We really have that full circle experience. And then, the last point, that you made around staying engaged with that candidate, I think it's, I don't know that I don't know that my recommendation would be any different than companies here in the U.S.
Yeah.
You've got to stay close to that candidate because. And how you go about that is you have to be creative.
Yep.
You have to find little ways of having touch points often with that individual and looking for the low frequency signals of, is everything transitioning smoothly.
Yep.
To your point, this is an interesting time of year because people have bonuses. Oftentimes these start dates get pushed out, the process gets protracted, and in recruiting we always say time kills all deals.
Yep.
Right? So yeah, I think working with a firm that has a full grasp of that process of recruitment and it doesn't just end with the offer is imperative.
Yeah.
I don't know, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that stands out to me, and you touched on it, I guess if we were to focus on those three categories, so number two being the benefits portion. And you and I have both seen when we talk to clients of ours that are in Israel or that are in Australia, and we say, listen, if we were to take this person out of the company they are today, and you factor in all of the benefits, what that company is contributing to this individual's benefits is $25,000.
Right.
That's like just a ballpark number. And their eyes are like, whoa. So as an advisory partner to these clients, I mean, we can put them in touch with the PEOs of the world, the ADPs, the Paychecks, those types of companies, and walk them through. These are the checklist items: medical, dental, vision, PTO, home office, internet reimbursement, phone reimbursement,
car.
If they're sales, car reimbursement, mileage. I mean, all of these things that I don't think, coming to market in the U.S., these OUS companies have a strong grasp on, at least in the beginning.
Yep.
And then our job as an advisor and as a partner to these organizations is to continuously fill them in on, have you thought about this? Have you thought about these components that it's not just going to be base bonus and LTI, because these people are going to have, more often than not, families. If they're coming from MedTech, more often than not, they are the sole benefit provider of the family household. So they don't have the luxury to go on a significant other's benefits because it's usually, they're carrying that weight.
That's right.
So that's a really strong advisory service that we offer.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. I think two things that I would touch on. One is, you mentioned earlier, this time of year, people are going to have bonuses that are coming, year-end bonuses that they might have to forego if they were to start right now. Companies that are OUS, they may not be structured like that, right? And so, and you use the term advisory, and I think it's a good one because our job isn't just to manage the recruitment process; it's to look around corners and find problems before they become problems.
Yep.
And so to put a bow on that, I really do think we are consultants to our clients versus recruiters.
Correct. Yep. And understanding, having done these types of roles, hundreds of times over, in the firm, we can bring that wealth of knowledge as to, have you thought about X, Y, and Z, and what happens if you don't get regulatory approval and you hire this salesperson? And are we going to continue to keep them on board while we get pushed out 90, 180, 360? Like, what happens then?
Yep.
So just at least posing that question, I think, is something important to think about. And going back to that first topic with the commercial people, like you said, it's not just your typical VP of sales and marketing role. I mean, these people are touching every aspect of the commercial process that in larger companies tend to be siloed.
Yep.
So, if you're sitting at a large strategic as let's just call it a director of sales, more often than not, you will have a technology, you'll have a region or a district or some type of territory, you'll have a team, and you'll have a goal.
Yep.
And that's your world, is just executing on those items and managing your team, managing your quota, and getting utilization and penetration of that
Very
technology.
siloed.
Exactly. And what these companies coming to the US, like I mentioned, we have ones from Israel, we have ones from Australia, we have ones from Ireland. Just, I mean, off the top of my head, the last few. I mean, the role that they're looking to fill, to your point, is really more so a general manager who is a still hands-on doer.
Right.
Because you need to come with the level of expertise where, you know, you can work cross-functionally, even, you know, not expecting to be a subject matter expert in regulatory or market access or pricing, but at least can be part of those conversations where you can say, based off my experience in the market and the KOLs that I work with, that's not gonna fly. We should think about it in a different way. So if you're sitting in that position at a larger strategic and your end goal is to be a VP of sales, and let's say you're 10 years removed from that type of opportunity being presented to you because you have a senior director, you have a VP above them, and it doesn't look like they're going anywhere, and your thought is to expedite my career, I'm going to have to go to a smaller play and take more of the associated risk. What are some things that I can do in this role to expand the scope of my responsibilities so that when they ask, have you had conversations on pricing? Are you part of those discussions for new product launch? I mean, some of the most interesting profiles that I've come across lately as it pertains to this specific type of person are, they come up through marketing, they move over to sales, they do training, you know, they get involved in medical affairs. I mean, that to a startup is like, whoa, you know, this is a person we need to talk to. It's an eye opener.
Yep.
So I would say that type of role is becoming more and more interesting and more and more valued, perfect word, for these companies that are coming to the US, because you need to be that multiple hat wearer, but then when it's time, whether that's 6 months or a year from now to sell, that's your core competency, and you can hit the ground running there.
And maybe to even take that one step further is just, to your point, when we do hit that point where it's time to sell, you can't be that leader from behind the desk.
Correct.
You've got to be out in front. You've got to be willing to be out in front. You've got to be willing to grind it out, to hit some singles and doubles.
Yep.
And then as the business starts to flourish, then you'll build that team out underneath you.
Correct. Yeah. If your first answer to, okay, we want to commercialize in X, Y, and Z, what are your thoughts? Well, I need to hire 15 people. That's usually not the best answer in a startup.
100%.
And then jumping to that last point, okay, so you've gotten 2/3 of the way there. You found that unicorn as a VP sales and marketing who's worn all those different hats. You've negotiated compensation. You've come to grips with the fact that the benefits are going to cost you a lot more here in the US than they do OUS. The person signs the offer letter. Everyone's happy. We have our guy. We have our girl. The job's not done there.
Nope.
Right? So what are some things that you've seen be successful as a recruiter? Because some of this does fall on you and on us to keep that consistent cadence with that person. And the organization to do the same. What have you seen as an example of things that may have gone wrong, or as an example of things of, if I could have every client that I work with do it this way, we would be in a much better position for when that person does actually start?
Yeah, I think it starts with the communication between the recruiter and the company first, right? The search firm and the company is having that coordinated effort of, hey, I'm going to reach out, I'm going to check in, you know, every couple of days. Here's some things that I'm going to be throwing out there to them. You know, hey, how was it received? You know, when you tendered your resignation, you know, but also coaching the client on that as well, and coaching them not so much just from the standpoint of what to ask or when to ask it, but it's not only just what the response you get, but how fast do they respond? Are they still engaged?
Yep.
Are they responding in the similar cadence that they were during the interview process? All of those little, I call them low frequency signals, right?
The depth of their responses
that you're paying attention to. You know, if you text them and say, "Hey, can we catch up?" and they respond right back, you know, or in the likeness that they did during the interview process, that's what I would call congruent behavior.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing, right? So those are the things that I usually look out for, and I think, you know, again, it's just communicating that with the client so that it's a coordinated effort, and also, you know, I don't want it to all sound, you know, so scripted. You are calling to check in with the candidate as well, too, right? And to make sure everything's going well. And then I guess the last thing I would say is, you know, I always try to have that conversation about the counteroffer before the offer is even tendered.
Yeah.
You know, if you're dealing with really talented people, they're probably going to get a counteroffer.
Yeah.
You know, and I like to have that conversation. What's going to happen? Not do you think your company is going to offer you a counteroffer, but what's going to happen when they do?
Yeah.
Right.
And so in that particular conversation with you and the individual, what are some tells from your end that, okay, I feel comfortable with this, that if they do get countered, I don't have a ton to worry about. There's always that, you know, sliver that something could go wrong, or depending on their response, that you say, okay, we have some more lifting to do, we have some more convincing to do. Perhaps our offer and the scale and scope of the role isn't strong enough, so it's your responsibility to go back to the client. But I guess what are some of the things that you're listening to when you have that conversation with the individual to feel out where you are on the counteroffer?
Yeah, well, I think after 20 years in recruiting, you just get comfortable asking the uncomfortable questions, right? And peeling back that onion until you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And so, and the spidey senses, you know as well as I do, the spidey senses go up. I mean, you get that feel of, you know, hey, what's going to happen when they do offer you a counteroffer? And if you kind of get that soft, well, you know, I'll have to evaluate it when that happens. Usually the question is, okay, what would cause you to not have to evaluate it? What would cause you to be fully in? Is there anything we can do proactively to make sure that, you know, that this is something that you don't have to question when you get a counteroffer? And I think the kiss of death in recruiting is when you don't pay attention to those spidey senses and you just think, oh, that's, you know, cross your fingers, that's going to work out, that's going to work out, that's going to work out.
Correct.
It usually doesn't.
Yep. Yeah. And it's not, I think when people think counteroffer, it's, you know, not always about the money. You know, we talk so much about like mentors and mentees and those types of relationships, and some people are just petrified to have that discussion with a mentor that brought them into the organization.
That's right.
And if that person says, hey, you know, Mike, I really need you to stay. We have this big project, like the guilt could get them to stay more than an actual offer itself.
Yeah, it might not be the money, it might not be the company, it might be the person they're working for. They may have followed that person to 3 different companies. Yeah. And this may be an opportunity now for them to go forge their own path in medtech. Yep. And those are hard conversations to have. I've had those in my career, and you know, they're not fun conversations to have. But the one thing I always go back to, and there's there's Harvard case studies on this. There's you know, Forbes articles on it, on why accepting counteroffers is a bad idea. I always go back to, there's a reason you started looking. Yeah. There's a reason you leaned in when I tapped you on the shoulder about this opportunity. And if you take the candidate back to that, that usually can kind of level set the playing field. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And in those, you know, here in the U.S., typical is 2 weeks. In Europe, it's 3 months. So that makes it an additional challenge of that constant cadence. But, you know, what I've found to be successful is not only us keeping in touch with the individual, walking them through a resignation process, role-playing with them through what a counteroffer could look like. How would you handle this? Yep. What are you writing? What are you putting in your correspondence? But also having the client give little pieces of, I don't want to say homework, but little checkpoints with the individual
along the way. So, not enough to make them say, all right, hold on, I haven't started yet, so I can't be allocating half of my time to do work before I even started. But, you know, simple things like filling out, you know, HR documents, filling out, you know, different types of information for just administrative purposes and seeing how quick they get back to you.
Yeah, or a simple, hey, we're making a decision on this that's going to affect you when you come in. I'd love to get 10 minutes to get your perspective.
High level.
Yep.
You know, certainly not looking for you to put together a 30, 60, 90, like, you know, tomorrow.
Right.
But this is what we're thinking. Love to get your thoughts before you walk in the door so you're up to speed.
Yep.
And how engaged are they in those conversations?
Absolutely. No, it makes perfectly good sense.
Awesome.